Hey, hi, hello, and welcome to class. My name is Nora, if we haven't met before. Today we are talking about the wrists. So, if you have been having any kind of wrist issues, wrist pain, wrist injuries, we're going to talk about a really great way to warm up fully before you do anything on your hands, like a yoga class, a Pilates class, etc. And we're also going to talk about specific poses to modify in the yoga practice and how you can still get the benefit of those poses without putting strain on the wrists. So if you're with me, let's get started. We'll meet on the mat. So from the mat, let's begin in a kneeling position. You'll stretch the arms either out in front of you or overhead. Curl the fingertips in to make fists and then pop the fingertips open. And I like to think about the fingertips like matches that you're striking against your palms being the matchbox. And if this is too much for the shoulders, the hands can come down in front of you. And as we're here, you're breathing in and out through the nose, paying attention to the sensation in the wrists. You might start to feel a burning sensation in the wrists or the forearms, and that means that you're doing it right because we want these muscles of the wrist and forearms to fire before we put a lot of weight on them like we do in a traditional vinyasa yoga practice. We're here for another 10. Pick up the pace for 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Shake that out. Release the tension that built up. You've got 2 mixing bowls next to you. You're going to place both of your hands into those mixing bowls, fingers spread wide. Take the pinky edge side of each hand and scrape the outer edges of those bowls, whatever you've got going on in those bowls today. Maybe it's a little bit of cookie dough. Maybe you've got a brownie batter mix, whatever it is. We are trying to scoop up all of that goodness as we articulate through the wrists. For another 4, 3, 2, and 1. Come back to center, hands in the mixing bowls. Take the thumb edge side of each hand, and you're scraping the insides of those bowls again. Now, this side might feel a little bit wonkier. We just don't have quite as much rotation in this direction. That's okay. Make sure that you're still keeping all 10 fingers spread wide, and you are feeling a little bit of that heat again in the wrists and the forearms. For another 3, 2, and 1. Shake it out. Let it go. Let's come down to a kneeling position with the hands on the floor in front of you. You want to keep most of the weight back towards your heels. And I'm going to come a little bit closer so you can see the detail here. Notice the creases of your elbows. Now, those elbow creases, they will automatically, for many of us, turn inwards. I want you to swivel the elbow creases forward and then swivel the elbow creases in towards each other. And what we're doing here is rotating the upper arm in the shoulder socket. Try to keep all 10 fingers and the palm flat on the earth as you do this. For another 4, 3, 2, and 1. Good. Let's walk it out to tabletop, stacking shoulders over wrists. And then the same thing. You're just swiveling the elbow creases, pointing forward and pointing in. Pointing forward, pointing in. Make sure you're keeping the knuckles of the hands grounded on the earth as you swivel. It might be easier to swivel one arm than the other. Pay attention to that. That'll impact the wrists. We're here for another 4, 3, 2, and 1. Sit back to the heels again. Plant your palms firmly on the earth. From here, as you inhale, lift the heels of the palms up, rising up onto the first knuckles of the hands. And as you exhale, very gently peel the palm back down onto the earth. And again, inhale to lift, and exhale to lower. Nice and easy. Inhale to lift, and exhale, lower. 2 more. These are called wrist push-ups, and they're as good for the wrists, as good at strengthening the wrists, as regular push-ups are for your upper back and shoulders. Last one. And lower. Walk the hands out to tabletop, stacking the shoulders over the wrists, the hips over the knees, and then again, wrist push-ups. Inhale, peel the heels of the hands up off of the earth. Exhale, lower, really slow, taking your time, making sure that this is a controlled motion. Inhale to lift, peeling up slow, stacking the wrist on top of the first knuckles. Exhale, lowering down. For another 3. Another 2. Last one. Good. Walk the hands back, sit back to the heels, shake the hands out a little bit, let that go, release the tension. All right, walk the hands all the way back out to tabletop, stacking shoulders over wrists, and then turn your fingertips towards the outer edges of the mat, outer edges of the mat. All 10 fingers spread wide, shift your shoulders side to side. Notice how things are feeling in the wrists as you do this, if there are any points of pain or tenderness. And then turn your fingertips in towards each other. Again, all 10 fingers spread wide, shoulders stay stacked. A little bit of side to side motion. The heels of the palms might pop up, but the knuckles behind the fingers stay down. Nice. Turn the fingertips back towards your knees, palms flat to the earth. Create a little bit of forward and back motion with the hips. Again, heels might pop up, but the knuckles stay down. Lovely. From here, let's flip the palms up, fingertips turn in towards each other. Backs of the hands pressing down into the mat. A little bit of side to side motion. Again, bring a little bend to the elbows. Curl your fingertips in. Try to make fists. It's not going to work very well, but it will stretch the backs of the wrists a little bit more. And then come up onto your first knuckles, making fists, planting those first knuckles on the earth. Thumbs are outside of your fists. This is a really, really useful hand position to use if you are having problems when your wrists are in flexion. Flexion means that your palms are flat on the floor and you've got this deep crease at the wrist. You're pulling the fingertips back towards the upper arm. If you have pain when you do this and you plant the palms on the floor and you step back to plank pose, you can always come up to that first knuckle planted and use this in plank pose, chaturanga, even downward facing dog. So remember this. This is a really useful tool. We're going to do one more thing to make sure that the wrists are warm here. You'll tuck the toes, roll back over the feet, and come to a squatting position. From here, you're going to lift your hips up. You're going to take both of your wrists and pass them behind your knees. So your wrists are going into your knee pits. And then sit your hips down for Malasana Squatter's Pose. You get to decide how much pressure there is on the wrists here. So if this is too much, sitting all the way down, lift your hips up a little bit, and that'll take the pressure off. Try curling your fingertips in to make fists and opening them back up. Couple of rounds like this. This is a very common circus performer trick to kind of reset the wrist. We're cutting off blood flow. And when we release, all of this fresh blood will rush back into the joint. Take one more breath. Exhale, lift your hips, release the wrist, sit back, shake the hands out. Lovely. So I recommend that you do this warm up. If you have wrist pain or you're working on your wrist strength, I recommend that you do this warm up before every yoga class you take so that the wrists are feeling ready for what you're going to do in class. Cool. If you are with me for the rest of this class, we're going to talk about modifications for common poses in Vinyasa yoga, so that way you aren't stressing the wrist if you're dealing with an injury or you're having a day where you're experiencing a lot of pain. So if you're with me for that, let's get to it. Instead of putting an injured wrist at risk when you're doing your yoga class, instead of skipping the yoga altogether, we're going to talk about ways to modify. So let's come to plank pose, palms flat on the earth. Navel lifting up and in, squeeze your glutes. Now, if you're experiencing pain here, come up onto the first knuckle, make fists, thumbs outside of the fist. Take a breath in your plank and exhale, lower down, chaturanga. From here, you can either lift to upward facing dog, drawing the heart forward, or from that low plank position, you can also just push up to the top of a plank. Exhale, take it back to downward facing dog. Now you can continue to use knuckles on the earth, or now that there's a little less pressure on the wrist, you can come back to palms flat on the earth. You decide what works for you. Experiment with it. Notice the places and movements in your practice that create pain in the wrists, and then modify from there. Another really useful way to modify plank pose is to come down onto the forearms. So pushing the forearms down into the earth, all the way from the elbow through the ends of the fingers. Sometimes the wrists like to pick up here. Make sure you're pushing down through the wrist as well. And I really like this modification if you'll be taking your plank pose towards side plank. So you can let the heels fall to one side, lift the opposite arm. And you're still getting all of the oblique work here that you get inside plank without putting the entire body weight on one wrist. Take a breath, and we come back to center. Let's do the other side. Heels fall to the left, inhale, right arm high. Push down through the forearm from the elbow through the wrist all the way to the fingertips. And exhale, bring the right palm down. Drop the knees. Let's talk about how to modify for crow pose, a common arm balance, especially in beginner to intermediate classes in Vinyasa Yoga. So in traditional crow pose, you have the palms planted on the earth. Plant the knees on the backs of the triceps. You'll look forward, lean forward, and the idea is to balance the body weight over the wrists. If you're having wrist pain, this is sure to aggravate whatever issues you've got going on. So instead of putting yourself at risk like that, we're actually going to lay down on the back. So this is a really easy one. If a teacher is cueing you to come into crow pose from the same starting position that you would take to get to crow, you're just going to lean back, lay back, pull the knees into the chest, bring the big toes to touch, point the toes like you're doing crow. Stretch the arms up to the sky and then flex the wrist like you're planting your palms on the ceiling. From here, you're pushing those hands up against the ceiling, trying to lift the upper back away from the floor. We're doing little crow sit-ups here. So we're getting the same core work that you get from crow pose, but without that stress on the wrists. We're also working against gravity in a different way than we do in crow pose, right? Normally in crow, you're trying to lift the whole body away from the earth, fighting gravity. In this sense, we're fighting gravity by lifting our back body up away from the earth. We're here for another 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Release. Take a breath. And from here, you'll rock yourself back up, cross the ankles, plant the palms, and step back into plank, continuing with the flow that your class is moving through. So my goal with these is really to provide you easy, quick modifications that you can slip in without disrupting the flow or rhythm of what's going on in the rest of the class. Cool. Let's talk about one more thing. Sometimes you come to a class and you're working on handstand, you're working on some inversions, and you realize, man, my wrist cannot take it. First option, cut out the inversions. You don't have to do handstand. That doesn't have to be a part of your practice. But if you say to yourself, I want to work on training the skills of handstand, even if I can't stand on my hands right now, great. 2 things you can do. One is to stand entirely upright. Bring the soles of the feet together, hug your inner thighs together, squeeze your glutes, push your groin forward, and then lift your low belly up and in. Reach the arms up overhead and flex the palms like you are standing on the ceiling. And we're just practicing handstand form here. So you're pushing that ceiling away, driving the shoulder blades up off of the back body towards the sky. You're drawing the navel in and the ribs pulled down. Think a little bit of a hollow body shape in the front body. So you're trying to carve out this space between the bottom of your chest and the top of your groin. And you're lengthening through the spine as much as possible. Glutes are on, full body engagement. Take 3 breaths here. Navel in with the inhale, push the floor away through the palms. Exhale, ribs down, navel in, squeeze your glutes. Take 1 more breath in. And exhale, release. Second option for modifying handstand without using the wrists, you'll come down onto the front body, laying down on the earth. And we'll train this handstand shape in much the same way that we did standing up. Point your toes, inner thighs squeeze together. Squeeze your glutes, push your groin down. Think about sending your pubic bone towards the floor. Stretch the arms forward, flex your wrists so you're pushing the floor away through the palms. From here, you can drop the forehead to the earth. I like chin to the mat personally. That's just me, because when you are in handstand, most of us will look towards the floor between the palms. From here, lift your navel up away from the floor. Can you get your belly up while pushing your pubic bone down? Whole body engagement. You're pushing away through the palms. Ribs down, navel in. Create that hollow body shape in the front. Pubic bone is pressing down, glutes are squeezing, and we're holding. Breathe with me. See if you can create this space between the front body and the floor. Chest is down, pubic bone's down, but the space in between the chest and the pubic bone is lifting. Take one more breath in. And exhale, release. Hands come underneath the shoulders, press yourself up. I hope you guys are walking away from this class with a couple of new ways to both warm up the wrists, but also protect them in common vinyasa poses. If you have any questions, if you have any other things that you want to see from this channel or from these videos, please let me know. I would love to take your requests and make them into something useful that you can use every yoga practice. Thanks so much for joining me on the mat. Until we meet again, namaste.